We've been thinking about classes and objects, and we've been thinking that a class is a blueprint that creates objects, or a blueprint for an object. And then you're thinking, like, what's an object? Well, an object is just some idea in the real world that we're going to, I guess, describe with the programming language, with Java. So, in this case, I'm just gonna make a dog object. So yeah, because that's what I heard in class. So dog. So I'm going to be creating these dog objects, and then dogs, of course, have characteristics. The characteristics that I'm going to just use, I'm only going to use three. Um, it's going to be, I think, breed, age, and whether it's alive or dead. Uh, just to have three different types of characteristics. Okay, so first, I'm creating this class that will create a dog object. So I'm going to call it dog. Uh, Public class dog. And there's three things that you want to have inside a class. So the first is the instance variables, and those are just the characteristics of the object. So what I'm gonna have is private. First thing, I guess, breed. I don't even know how that would be a string. Breed. And I'm not gonna initialize it or anything. I'm just gonna declare it. Okay. And then what else? What did I say? Age. I'll say that's an integer. I'll use an integer. Private int age. And then also it'll be a boolean whether it's alive or not. So is alive. So it'll be a boolean. And we're gonna say is alive. So those are my instance variables. So and they describe my object. The next thing that I want to have are constructor methods. And a method is just a short piece of code that does like a specific task. So like a constructor is something that builds these objects. So I'm going to be building a dog. All the dogs are going to have different characteristics. Like it's going to have different breeds, different ages, and it's either going to be alive or dead. But the first kind of constructor that we're going to write is a default constructor, which just initializes everything at its base case. So like the breed, I'll just put nothing there because it's a string. For the age, I'll put 0, and for is alive, I'll put false. That's just to initialize it with the it's dead. It's a dead dog. I think it's funny. I guess maybe you might not. All right. Let's see. So the first thing that you want to have are instance variables. The second thing that you want to have are constructor methods. So you can always tell that a method is a constructor because it has the same name as the class. So that's what I'm gonna say. Public dog, and I think this is going to be a 0 argument constructor, meaning I don't put anything in the parentheses. I don't need anything. It's going to be my default constructor, which means it'll be the base case for everything. So I don't need to put in anything in here. So I'll say end 0 argument constructor. And what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to initialize all of these variables inside this constructor. So I'll say breed, that's going to be a string, so I'll say gets new string, but I'm not going to put anything in it. I'm just going to put like just quotation marks because there's nothing in between. So it doesn't put anything in breed. Let's compile, see if that's yes. Okay. And then I'm going to initialize the age. I'll just say age gets 0. And then is alive gets false. That's just the class. False. So we've just this right here is my default constructor. I'll be able to call this method every time I use the dog method with no arguments. I'll be calling my 0 argument constructor method, and it will build this dog, which has no breed, no age, and is not alive. Okay, so that's the 0 argument constructor. What about if we want to actually put things in for that? This will be a 3 argument constructor because I want to initialize 3 variables. So let's think about what that. I mean, it is a constructor method, so it is going to have the same name as the class. So I'll do the same thing again, public dog, except for I'm going to put stuff in the parentheses now. Anything inside the parentheses, like if you have one thing, it's a 1 argument constructor. The things inside the parentheses are called arguments. And I know that this one's going to be 3 arguments just because I want to initialize all 3 of these variables here. So end 3 argument. And then okay, so how do I do this? Well, I know that the first argument in here is going to be the breed, which is a string, and this is how I do it, just so I don't confuse myself. I just say, okay, well, I'll use the name of the class and the variable. So this will be dog breed. So some string called dog breed, and then I'll say here breed, which is this variable, gets dog breed, and I didn't spell it the same. There. This kind of seems redundant. Oh, it's a string, so I'm going to say new string dog breed. Okay. And it already knows that dog breed is a string, but I'm just writing it like that. So, well, you'll see. We use this new operator to create other strings are objects. So, hopefully we'll see this later on and we'll understand it a little bit better. But for right now, that's what I'm going to write. The next thing would be the age. So I'll say int, and I just put the name of the class. I'm pointing with my finger, but also with the whatever. The name of the class, so this will be dog age, and then also is alive. Dog is alive. So yeah, that's what I'll say. So, and that's a Boolean. Dog is alive, and then I'll initialize them all in here. So we'll see what this means. So the first thing we will need are instance variables. The next are constructors. Usually you have a default constructor, which just initializes everything at its base case, and then a different constructor using however many arguments to actually initialize it the way you want to initialize things. So what was this? Dog age. So I'll say age gets dog age. That's just an integer. And then the Boolean is alive. That'll be dog is alive. Alright, right now it seems redundant, but once you get things that are more complicated, you'll want to have it like this. Hopefully you'll see why in a little bit. But so the first thing are instance variables. Second thing is constructor methods. And the third thing is the twostring method. This will allow us to print out this dog object in any format that we want. The twostring method decides the format for when we print out this stuff. So I can say like system.out.println, and then I can put any like variable in there, and it'll print it out. Just, I mean, it's a simple variable, so it'll just print out. Like if I had an integer called x, I can just say system.out.println, and then in the parentheses I could put x, and it would just print out whatever's inside that variable. Well, if I want to print out an object, the object has more than one characteristic, so I kind of want to have a format for when I print it out, and this toString method decides that format. So I'll say public string, toString. I can't remember if that has parentheses or not. It does. So this would be end method toString. So what the heck am I talking? Well, I'm just gonna write it, and I'll kind of talk about the formatting, but I guess maybe this you just have to trust me for a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna create something called output. I think, yeah. Well, let me just double check. Yep. So I'm going to create a string called output because I want to be able to take all this information, convert it to a string, and then print it out in some way. So let's just say string called output, and gets new string. I could put stuff in here, but I'm just gonna do it the same way the PowerPoint does it. And then, so what am I gonna do? Okay, how do I want to output all this stuff? How do I want, if I wanted to print a dog, what do I want it to look like? Well, I'm just gonna tag everything. Output gets, we'll just say breed. And if you don't understand this right now, hopefully when I run it, you'll see what happens. And then I'll put breed plus, and for whatever reason, I want to do them on separate lines, so I'm going to add a new line. And I'll say age, colon space, and then I'll add the age in there. And again, a new line. This is just my preference. This is, I mean, I'll mess around with this. Hopefully you'll understand why I'm doing this when I run it. We'll see. Or you'll see, I suppose. Is, well, alive? I don't know how I should say this. Alive. I'm just going to say alive. And then is I think that's all that I want. So I'll close that. And then the toString method returns something. So it's going to return the output. So if when I have a driver that runs this class, if I want to say system.out.println and I want to print a dog out, it automatically just uses the toString method, so it can print it out in this format, and we'll see what that looks like. Hold on. Return output, and I think that should compile. Yes. Okay. So really, right now we don't have a main method like to run all this stuff. We just have our class that creates this dog object, and this is how it does it. But this, I mean, there's nothing to run in here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a driver that will run all this stuff. So I'm gonna say new class. I'm gonna call it just dog driver. Usually, you just tack on this and then driver. So this will be dog driver, and then I'm gonna move it over just so you can see some arrows and select it all. This is where I'm going to have my main method. So I'll say public class dog driver. And I'll do my main method, so public Okay, so I have my outline. What do I want to do? Okay, so this is the whole idea. Normally, like if I wanted to create an integer, I would say like int and call it something x and maybe initialize it. I could say like int x is I don't know, 4. And then if I wanted to print that out, I can do system.out.println and then put it in an x, and it would print out 4. Great, that's fantastic. However, I just created a class that creates this dog object. So really what I'm thinking is, instead of creating something that's an integer or like a string or a boolean or whatever, I can just create something of type dog instead of type integer. I mean, that's how I think of it, at least. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something of type dog. So I'm going to use my dog object. It's a dog that I'm creating. What do I want to name this? I'll name it Sparky, because that's a dog name. So so I'm creating a dog object. I'm naming it Sparky, and I'm saying new dog. And if I don't put anything in here, then I'm actually using my default constructor. What does that mean? It means nothing gets put into the breed, 0 gets put in for the age, and then it's not alive yet. So once I do this, I've just created Sparky, this dog, Sparky, this dog object called Sparky, and then I initialized it with my default constructor, which is a 0 argument constructor. It puts everything in its base case, and then I can print it out. So this is the fun part. System.out.println, and and I can print out Sparky. Actually, I don't want to capitalize it. So what if I run the driver? It will call the dog, the default constructor method dog. It'll put in the default stuff to Sparky, and then I'll print it out, hopefully. And then this is what's nice about BlueJ. It shows you that, okay, there's something in here that's calling something in here, and it's the dog object. So let's run this, and I printed out just this whatever Sparky was. And remember, I put nothing in there. I also put the 0 age and alive false, because that's the default. So that's, and like if I did this, if I change this around, this is the part where you try to understand, you play around with things. If I put in, if I save this, the default constructor is going to put in for the breed, you did this, and it's going to be, I compiled it already. Okay, so now if I run this, remember I'm using the default constructor, so I already compiled it. Now it says you did this. So it calls that method, the constructor method, from here and fills in Sparky. So I'm going to change it back real quick, and then I'll show you how to use the 3 argument constructor. So that's the default constructor. Compile. And then that's all fine and dandy. I'm going to create another dog object. I'll name it something else. So it's like I'm creating like dog variables, dog objects, really. So I'll say dog. I want to create a dog object, and this time I'll name it shadow. And new dog. Except for this time, I'm going to put in arguments. And I'm going to use my 3-argument constructor. So the first argument has to be the dog breed, which is a string. So that means, where is it? The string that I'm going to say golden, I don't know how to spell golden retriever, so I'm just going to say yellow lab, or just lab. Labradoodle. I don't know how to spell that either, so I'm just going to say lab. Alright, cool. And then the next argument was the age of the dog. We'll say 5 years old. This, when I'm using the dog constructor method and I'm putting in arguments, it has to be in the same order in which it's defined. So first I have the breed, so the breed has to come first here. Next I have the age, so the age has to come next. And then lastly, is alive, we're going to say true. It has to be a Boolean. Then, hold it, it compiles, yes? Okay, cool. Then, if I wanted to print out shadow, let's see what would happen. I'll comment this out. I had a dog named Shadow once. And it was a golden retriever, but I don't know. I don't want to spell that. So, now, if I run this, I'll print out shadow, which will have this information in it. Hopefully, if I did it right. So I'll run the driver. And there we go. Breed is a lab, age 5, and true. So what is this private? Making this stuff private. Normally, when you create an object, you can access it. I mean, sometimes you can access it with the dot operator. So if I said, well, how would I do this? If I said, well, I have a dog object called shadow, and if I want to access one of these variables, I could say dog.age. Let's see that. So right now, shadow has 5 as its age. If I said dog, no, not dog, shadow dot age, and I'm trying to change it. I'll change it to 6. Let's see what happens if I try to compile this. Age has private access. So if I want to access it with the dot operator, I can't because it's private. That just means the only things that can access these instance variables are methods that are inside this class. So if I didn't make them private, they're public. That means other things that are not inside this class, so other methods, like my main method, other methods that are not in this class can change this. So now let's see what happens. Now everything's fine. I can change the age to 6, and then if I printed out shadow again, this is the fun part. Just messing around. Hopefully you give time to mess around. So compile it. Now if I do this, the age should be 6, right? First time it was 5, next time it was 6. So if you don't make them private, any other like any other class or method could change these variables, but we make them private. And in the AP subset, we always make these instance variables private. So that means the only way to change these instance variables are through your methods in your class that creates the object. So like the only way we can change these when we set them to private is to go through the constructors. That's pretty much all that means. So now this won't work, right? Yeah, that won't work anymore. Alright, that's the end of this entirely too long video. That was 24 minutes long. Jeez, I'm done. Goodbye.